So Jerry, you get 10 minutes. Try to finish your presentation quickly so that you have enough time for Q&A.
Right. Okay. I'm Jerry Feidelson, co-founder and CEO of Agribody Technologies. We're an ag biotech company based in San Diego. And what I'll be telling you about today is our technology and business and market penetration for increasing the shelf life of perishable products such as fruits, vegetables, and flowers using patented gene technology. The problem we're addressing is food waste, an enormous and often underappreciated problem. Amazingly, we lose about 1/3 of all the food that's produced in the world, 1.3 billion tons. That's an inconceivable amount to me, but it is enough to feed 2 billion people. And so the loss is very different in different crop types. Roots are pretty stable, but fruits and vegetables, we can get up to 50 to 60, even 70% loss. The economic cost of this directly is about $1 trillion a year, mostly in the developed world, but quite a bit with emerging countries. Indirect effects, such as climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, loss of wetlands, wasted fertilizer, water, et cetera. The inputs that go into this wasted food is about another $800 billion a year. So it's an enormous opportunity. I already mentioned greenhouse gas emissions. If food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd worst country in the world with respect to methane emissions after China and the United States and ahead of India and Russia. The UN has one of their critical development goals to reduce food waste in half in the next 10 years, which is remarkably ambitious, and we think we can make a significant contribution to that. The current approaches to solving this problem, I characterize as either physics or chemistry. Quite obviously, you can chill food, reduce the temperature, and that helps extend their shelf life during transportation, during storage, and of course in consumers' homes. But this has very significant OpEx impacts, and a lot of poor countries simply can't afford it or don't have the infrastructure for it. Another approach is to exclude oxygen by substituting it with carbon dioxide or nitrogen, and that can be done in individual packages or in rooms where this produce is stored. Again, expensive OpEx. And the third approach is one you may have heard of. There's a Santa Barbara-based company called Appeal that just recently raised $250 million on a $1 billion valuation. And they're basically taking agricultural waste products and coating produce, such as avocados in Costco. For years, people have used carbon waxes and other coatings. So again, physics or chemistry. We believe all of these are very valid and that our technology using genetics is a perfect complement in combination with these existing approaches. We build a reduction in food waste by extending the shelf life inside the crop itself by genome editing the seeds. We do it once for each crop variety, so there's no need for continued treatments. In our market research, we found that farmers really like the idea of not having to change their processes, but rather just buy seeds that have been improved by this method. There was a lot of judge input about how this is related to COVID. Well, making fewer shopping trips during a pandemic is obviously very important. You take your life in your hands when you go shopping, so going shopping less often is obviously a huge advantage. We don't think we'll have an impact during this pandemic, but I believe every seed company is going to be addressing this issue, trying to extend shelf life for future pandemics. The way our technology works is illustrated by this slide. It's sort of embarrassing as a PhD in genetics from Stanford that I have to show all of my science on one slide, and it's a cartoon. But here it is. There are two genes that work together that are highly conserved. That means the sequences are the same in many, many different organisms, not only plants, but also animals, archaea, fungi. 5 of the 6 kingdoms of life have these same two genes that encode these two proteins. And what happens in plant cells is that every plant is always sensing the relationship between this decorated form of the protein and the undecorated form. That's catalyzed by this protein. What my co-founder, John Thompson, discovered many years ago is that if you reduce the amount of this particular protein, either by antisense or other methods, in other words, shrinking the amount of the decorated form, or alternatively, increasing the target of that protein. In either case, he got three traits. One is extended shelf life of perishable products. That's an output trait of importance to consumers. But the other two traits are important for farmers and seed companies: increased biomass seed yield, as well as enhanced tolerance to abiotic stress like drought, high temperature, low nutrients, salt, as well as some tolerance to disease. These three traits, which seem very different, are all mediated by reduction in cell suicide. We get less senescence and better growth. Here's some data on tomatoes showing that 7-week-old tomatoes look just as good as 1-week-old controls. And with bananas, this row on the top sort of reminds me of Costco. Costco bananas are either underripe or over the hill. So we can see 2-week-old bananas are as good as 3 or 4-day-old controls. Same thing with flowers. I don't have time to show all the data. It's protected by 15 patents using transgenic methods. We filed internationally now genome editing applications. We've in-licensed a method that's different than Cas9. So anybody that messes with these two genes is stepping on our IP. We have a great team. Sorry?
Yeah, you're already 6 minutes if you want to.
Okay, we have a great team with experience in all the relevant traits we need. Our business is based on licensing and co-development right now. We want to introduce this trait into other crops through breeding, and eventually will become a company. We've raised 1.6 million. We've got proof of concept in a number of crops. We filed the key patents, as I mentioned, and we've already generated over $350,000 in revenue. We've done 7 deals now. 2 of them are almost in progress, so there's tremendous traction among seed companies. We've opened a $2 million pre-series A round. This is what we're going to be using the money for. And we're targeting a sale in 5 or 6 years. We have a clear path to cash flow, lots of profitability. We hope to close this pre-A, do 1 Series A, and no further dilution.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'm driving around town with this license plate, so this company has to be successful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Let's leave some time for Q&A.
Sure.
So, Keith,
Jerry, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety around, genetic modification in foods. How do you give the world comfort around that topic?
Yeah, well, if we talk about technology, that's a very tough sell. What we have to talk about are traits. Mm-hmm. And the trait of shelf life may be sufficiently interesting that people won't care that much how it's done. So there's a legal aspect to it through regulation, and there's a soft aspect through getting a public license. We're trying to avoid what happened before with GMOs by not focusing on the science, but just saying, look, there's only one change. This is not regulated. It's no different than what can happen naturally. And most importantly, there's no foreign DNA. So this can happen naturally. We're just accelerating a natural process in the lab. And there were no other changes to this crop other than this one mutation, this one gene.
Are you saying that this mutation happens in nature and you're just sort of grabbing it and forcing it? Is that the angle you're taking on that?
I can't prove that this mutation happens in a crop. In a big farm, if you've got 10,000 plants, one of them might be bigger and it could have this mutation. So we haven't screened for it naturally, but it can be produced through chemicals and non-GMO methods. So in Europe, we'll have a problem, but we have 10 jurisdictions around the world where it is not a problem.
Okay. Thanks.
What about flowers? Have you thought about applying this to the fresh flower market?
Absolutely. Horticulture is a great hotspot for us. The problem is the horticulture market is very fragmented. So outside of roses and carnations and chrysanthemums, there's so many different varieties, so many different colors. It's hard to get penetration there, but we do have a deal in roses, and a 3-week rose we think will make a big hit.
Who do you, what's your typical selling price and who do you sell it to? And
so seed companies are our partners. We typically charge a tech access fee anywhere between $15,000 and $50,000 just to play in our sandbox. We charge a annual maintenance fee during the R&D phase. Then there's a commercialization fee if the seed company believes this is going to go the full road. and then we have a royalty on sale. So that's a very traditional licensing model. We also do co-development where we co-invest with our customer. In that case, we get a percentage of what's called net trade value, which is essentially a super royalty. But ultimately, we'd like to introduce this crop by conventional breeding, and that's the way we can scale. So if you ask me how do we scale this, it's not by genome editing one elite variety at a time, but having kind of a universal donor. And that's what we want to use this money for, to prove that we can scale, get one long shelf life tomato and use that to breed into dozens of other crops. Margins are really good on that model. We could charge $20,000 to do that, and it costs us about $5.
The answer now, Jerry.
Thanks.
I want to ask all the founder, keep your answer very short. Thank you, guys. Let's move on.
Thanks, Jerry.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thanks. Ram, you're there?